So we are meeting again for the second day to talk about auditory processing and sensitivity disorders. And one of the people that we're really lucky to have here is Jackie Edry, who's been here for she's in the group that I manage on Facebook, but she herself is an author. And I'm hoping she can tell us a little bit more about her experience with her son and the experience in Israel because of the influence from our group.
Okay. So I'm Jackie Edry. Nice to meet you all. I am also neurodivergent, and I authored a book, Moving Forward, Reflections on Autism, Neurodiversity, Brain Surgery, and Faith. And I myself am a brain surgery survivor, and I do have auditory processing issues myself. And I have a 26-year-old autistic son. From the time he was very young, we knew he had auditory. Can you hear?
I want to turn on the captions.
Oh, okay.
Because they're not on.
Okay.
Where are the captions? Captions. Here they are. Show the captions. Yes. Okay.
Okay. So I have a 26-year-old autistic son, and from the time he was young, we understood he had very severe auditory processing issues. That's probably, I think, his biggest challenge. What it's less in the well, no, it also sound sensitivity, but also the inability to understand spoken language, to follow conversations, definitely missing parts of words, inability to sit in a group and filter sounds and follow conversation, minimal verbal skills, a really serious language impairment. And I think that most of it came from the fact that he wasn't hearing properly. Actually, when he was in the second grade, he started to communicate better because he learned how to read. And then what he couldn't hear verbally, he would read, and then he would be able to make more sense of things. So it was really important that he acquired reading skills. And so we did auditory integration training with him when he was younger, and it helped a bit, and all different kinds of programs, auditory training. But I really felt that he was more reading lips and focusing on body language and writing. We actually started following, found that when we wrote with him, particularly on WhatsApp and things like that, in recent years, he communicated much better than he did by speech and following auditory conversations. So a while back, I found Dr. Ray's website, actually, because after a little bit after I started spoken to you, a little after I published my book, I started looking around online to meet people who were working there, because I do talk about all the different types of sensory processing in my book. And I found Dr. Ray, and we hooked up and we spoke. And I guess about 6 months, it was in the summer, that I decided. I was sitting with my son, and my other son had a group of friends sitting there, and they were all following a conversation, and I just saw how incredibly painful it was, because he just, no matter what we tried to do, he couldn't follow a conversation. He was sitting at the table wanting to participate, and everyone was saying different things, and he started to talk at the beginning, and then he just sat there and spaced out, and then in the middle he blurted out all different kinds of things that had popped into his head because he couldn't follow the conversation, even though the things were not relevant to the conversation. So it caused all kinds of social challenges as well. And so I reached out again to Dr. Ray and said to her, I live in Israel. I don't know what we can do to help my son. And she suggested that we look for a provider here. And she very, very generously said she would help train any provider that could help us out here in Israel if necessary in order to try low gain hearing aids with him. So I actually approached quite a few of them around where I lived, and no one actually knew what I was talking about. And they had no idea. They looked at his hearing test and they said, oh, he's got normal hearing. No, it's not normal hearing. It's in the normal range, but he doesn't have a clue what we're saying. And his bearer is a little bit slow. He's processing he's picking up things slower than the average person, but this is not functional hearing. It may be in the normal range, but it's certainly not functional hearing in any way, shape, or form. Actually, so we spoke, and then I did some more searching, and there's only 2 places in the country that actually know how to test for auditory processing issues. One of them is the Tel Aviv Hospital, and was a Hadassah Hospital. So I called the place where he was tested for an APD, and fortunately, there's a Canadian audiologist who had heard about low gain hearing aids, and she was able to program them for him. And so in July, he got his hearing aids, and his whole life changed completely. It's just incredible. First thing is, he doesn't move without them. He, gets up. The first thing he does is he puts them in, and it has helped him in every aspect of his communication and life. He also processes language much faster. I found he doesn't have that kind of delay before answering. Sometimes it would take him up to a minute to answer a question, I guess, because it took him so long to understand the verbal input and then try and process and then coordinate his mouth. And it was such a difficult process for him. It would take him a really long time to answer, which would cause a lot of problems for him because a lot of times people would wait a little while and then think he didn't understand and ask him something else or do something else and give up. So now he ask him a question and he actually answers it. Oftentimes he would actually repeat it back as well immediately, some echolalia, which has decreased significantly since he has his hearing aids, which is also incredible. And he can sit at a table and participate in the conversation and not blurt out things in the middle that aren't connected, or not look like he's not getting it, or see the pain in his eye because he's trying so hard. He doesn't start yawning after 2 minutes. And he works in a coffee shop. He's washing dishes. And so not far away, there's the counter where they make the sandwiches. And his boss would never, until he got his hearing aids, his boss wouldn't be able to communicate with him from where the counter was and where he was in the kitchen, because he wouldn't understand anything he said. He would have to approach him and look him in the face and read his lips. And I asked his boss about a couple of weeks after he got his hearing aids if he sees any difference. He says, yes, I can now talk to him from the counter when I'm working, and he understands what I'm saying from his face. So it's really miraculous. It's changed his life completely. He's much calmer. And the other thing he would do is make quite a bit of auditory stimming. So he would make a lot of noise. I would hear him, squeaking all the time, and just lots of noise. I don't know if it's to reduce hypersensitivity from the sounds, cut out the sounds, or he was, I don't know exactly why he was making the noises, but since he has his hearing aids, the amount of squeaking and noises he makes also gone down significantly. And I asked him one day, I noticed he was making noise, and I asked him what was going on, and he said, bring me my hearing aids. And I said, oh, you didn't put them in, you forgot your hearing aids. So he put them in. I said, I asked him if the hearings, when he wears hearings, he doesn't need to make the noises. And he said, yeah, they help me. I don't need to make the noise. He doesn't have lots of descriptive language to explain to me what he's feeling and why he does what he does. So I can get that answer from him. But the only thing he tells me is his hearing aids are good and he likes them and he wants to wear them, and he really doesn't move without them. So I can say that if anyone is thinking or questioning about whether to try, yes, definitely, it can turn your child's life or your life around 180 degrees. And we had been trying for years, like I said, all different things. We use a live listen feature on an iPhone, which would, he would give the iPhone to people when they were talking in a class or in a lecture, and he would put an earphone in his ear. We tried all different kinds of things, and nothing really helped that much. It was just like a partial solution. Once he got his hearing aids, that's when we started to see things turn around, and his language is starting. He's talking much more and talking much clearer, because I think he's hearing and he's not so busy with processing and deciphering, so he can actually focus on the conversation and participate in the conversation. So it's been really incredible, the change that we've seen. And I can't even tell you how thankful I am to Dr. Ray. And I really strongly recommend anyone that's considering learning about that or trying. The audiologists here at also said, we never know what's going to happen. Try these things, but it's worth a try. Worst case scenario, it doesn't help. Best case scenario, life can turn around completely. And I my understanding of language and cognition and neurological development is, once you set the base down, you never know where it's going to go. So he's just started hearing now, but he hasn't hearing years. I imagine another year, 2, 3, 5, we're going to see the benefits of hearing, because his language is developing, and therefore his communication skills are developing, and his neuronal connections in his brain are developing, and the sky's the limit. So that's a little bit, Boaz. I don't know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer. Yeah.
So he's 26 now, and I mean, normally if you look at a kid or an adult who's 26 with autism and these plethora of other processing problems, most clinicians think you've run out of time. There's nothing more you can do.
Okay.
Nope.
Well,
Doesn't seem to be the case.
first of all, anyone who would think that is wrong. And I can say that very confidently. There are many studies about neuroplasticity, and it is never too late to do anything with anybody. That's the first thing. And second of all, anyone who tells you too late, no, never, that just change your provider, because the only thing that does is take away hope. I have seen so many miracles in my life. I spent many years with my son at the Feuerstein Institute, where there were children with varying disabilities. There's also a Department for Brain Injury people. I have seen people that have been after terror attacks, that their parts of their brain have been blown out, and I saw them recover and learn to, the language center of their brain was actually blown out of their head. And when they recovered, they learned to speak. So different areas of brain can take over. It takes time. Brain healing takes a long time. I could vouch for that, for someone who's had major brain surgery and had difficulties with speech and other things. And still do. I have difficulties with light processing, which is why I'm wearing these glasses, which are ill and spectral focus. And these are all things I actually write about and talk about on my blog too. So if you're looking, Dr. Ray's going to share some articles I wrote about my son on her blog if you're interested in learning more. Any other questions?
Yeah, we're gonna put it up on the website and also on the group. But you should take a look at Jackie's book. Is really good. It's simple to read, it's easy to understand, and it's really important.
I go into all the different senses and sensory processing, and it's not a heavy read, but I think it gives. I've been on both sides of the coin as a parent and professional, and then after my brain surgery, I woke up my senses scrambled, and my auditory processing in my left ear. I have auditory processing issues and nerve damage in my left ear, and light processing. All my sensors are scrambled basically. So I really got insights from both sides of the coin. I never ever give up hope, and never ever give up trying, and keep looking for solutions, because you will find them. And the more you work and believe in yourself, your child, the more chance you have of ensuring quality of life. And there are a lot of technologies out there now I don't know when they started with these higher quality hearing aids. You know, many years ago, hearing aids only, you know, they increased all the sounds, but now this, if the brain is not filtering, the hearing aid can filter. It's just miraculous to see how that improves life.
You know, I'll tell you, yesterday when we were talking with the group, I was talking about one of the clients I saw who was also autistic and worked at like UPS or one of these factories. And the parents would talk with him and he would require 10 or 15, sometimes 20 seconds even to respond.
Yeah.
And with low gain hearing aids, he became instantaneous.
The same thing with my son. My son would take up to a minute. I would time him. And it was so frustrating. You know, and most people don't get that. They would see it and then so they'd ask the question again and then again, and that's more stimulus. And then they would just ask another question, or he would echoically repeat back, I guess, to try and understand if he was maybe validate what he was hearing, or there are lots of reasons why there's echolalia. I'm not quite sure why he had the echolalia, but that also decreased.
Well, I'll tell you,
incredibly.
fast response to speech in that poll, the poll that we had was 40 people from audiologists around the world. And of that group of 40, 55% of the people in that poll who were voting because they had benefit. So 55% said faster response to speech was a benefit.
Well, of course, yeah, okay. It because it reduces the time. I can tell you from myself, that I don't hear properly in my left ear, so it takes me a long time to try and understand what people are saying, and my brain is busy with the comprehension, and we're deciphering, and then that will slow down my response. And I imagine someone like him, he actually had viral meningitis when he was 9 months old. So we don't know if that's the root of his neurological differences. And certainly meningitis is known to damage the auditory processing. But it was interesting the other day because he woke up in the morning and he came to talk to me in the kitchen, and he didn't put his hearing aids in. And I noticed he was standing way too close to me suddenly. It was in my face, which is stuff he doesn't do. And I'm looking at him and he's talking and he's really in my face and looking at me in my eyes and looking at, I didn't understand what he was doing. And then I noticed that he didn't have his hearing aid. And so I said to him, "Oh, you forgot hearing aids, go get them." And he ran and got them. And then he stood at a normal distance from me. He was no longer in my face and no one was staring at me to a level that would make somebody uncomfortable, right? If I was, and I realized that he'd become used to his hearing aids now, and he communicated more normally. And so suddenly, when he didn't have them in his ears, he wasn't ready to, you know, he had to brush up on his skills of lip reading, and he really had to get in my face to do that. And it was
so would you say what he was doing was behavior or a reaction?
Absolutely not behavior. It's trying to understand. Listen, I think there's a great misunderstanding certainly with autistic kids, or what they consider autistic. I mean, the diagnosis of autistic really means, to me, and this is my diagnosis, not the DSM, right? The sensory processing system, for the most part, is dysregulated to the extent that it makes a person's communication difficult. And that's probably the main reason we see a lot of the things we're seeing, whether it's a stimming behavior or the disconnectedness to cut out some of the stimuli. I mean, all these things, and it's just a name. It's like, I don't know, saying car or whatever. The name autism doesn't tell us anything about it.
So it's autism because it's autism.
It's autism because
no, because it's circular logic. We're going to blame everything on autism.
Yeah, but it's not. So if you regulate the sensory stuff, then a lot of the symptoms of what we would say autism disappear on their own. Doesn't mean the person's no longer autistic. They are, but they're in a different place, and they're not fighting with their sensory system to communicate. But many times, what's considered behavior or negative behavior is actually just a reaction to the sensory environment or the inability to process sensory environment correctly. And therefore, when you regulate that, those behaviors disappear. Therefore, you don't treat sensory stuff with behavioral techniques like ABA per se or things like that, because they're infected and then often are damaging and can cause serious PTSD, which I know many, many autistic adults who speak about that. And I can tell you that if your auditory processing is off, and I have hyper, in my left ear, not only do I not hear properly, but I also have severe hypersensitivity. And when I'm in a sensitive, non-sensory or auditory friendly environment, my body can freeze or I can have a total what's called meltdown. Okay, my body just trips like a trip circuit breaker, and I will stop functioning, or I would get very irritable. If I was a child, I'd probably tantrum, and then I'd run away. An auditory situation will make me want to run away. And when you balance those things out, then that is much better. I don't know. So it's not behaviors. It's reactions.
It might be worth hearing from Carol Ann Braley, who's coming from something that I'm believing a lot more about, which is SSP.
What is that?
The Safe and Sound Protocol. It's
Carol Ann what? What's her last name?
She's right above us.
Braley. Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi. Yeah, so I offer the Safe and Sound Protocol. I've become internationally recognized as an expert with it, particularly with people who have the most severe and complex issues, and especially in the misophonia community after one of my clients will not stop, well, actually a few of them won't stop talking about it online. But part of okay, so Safe and Sound Protocol involves listening to 5 hours of specially filtered music. And
it's like AIT?
Pardon?
Is it like Berard AIT?
I don't think so. I haven't actually heard of that approach.
Auditory integration training?
It's another
music.
filtered music.
My son did it. Yeah, it was like they called it.
Yeah.
I'm talking 30 years ago or 20,
Right.
25 years ago. I don't know.
There's a number of different sound therapies. I mean, I've heard of Tomatis, and there's a couple others I have heard of. SSP is different.
Okay.
And part of what it does, and it for many people will start to work fairly rapidly, it helps to reduce sensory sensitivities, including sound sensitivities. And Dr. Ray contacted me. We're quite interested to see what some of her clients for whom they've had improvement with low gain hearing aids, but it hasn't quite been enough, how they do with SSP. And on my end, for people who've had some improvements with auditory processing or misophonia or hyperacusis with SSP, but it hasn't been quite enough, how they do with her low gain hearing aids.
And where are you located?
I'm in Canada and Brantford, Ontario, but I work internationally with people for SSP.
I'd love to meet you afterwards. We should exchange info if Dr. Ray can hook us up.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, so far what we've been hearing, and I've been absolutely a skeptic on this idea that 5 hours of filtered music can do much, but we're gonna, my son is finally doing low gain hearing aids because he's been becoming really dysregulated as an autistic ADD kid. And what we found out with him anyway, if it's okay for a second, I want to share a screen.
I could say that sorry.
For just a
question about the SSP for a second.
Yeah.
So I became a certified provider a couple of years ago because I was really interested in the SSP. And I tried it on myself, and then I tried it with several clients. I could tell something was happening with me. The first time I used it, I actually became extremely dysregulated and felt like really sick, which, it tells me something's happening, right? So that's meaningful information too. But I didn't notice improvements over time, and I tried it on multiple clients and they experienced nothing at all. So I'm really curious about, for people who have used SSP, like if you have a specific type of client, like a profile that you've seen results with, because that's just not what I saw. And I eventually stopped using it because I didn't feel okay about, having people use something that my other clients are reporting was like ineffective.
So the
And
most
Katie, can you say where you're from and what you do?
Yeah, I'm in Reno, Nevada, and I run Facilitate Joy. We're a team of 13. We provide individual and group autism and ADHD services.
So the most important thing with SSP, in my opinion, is that it be carefully titrated to the specific nervous system of the individual rather than just using a formula. And when people go too quickly, they see exactly some variation of exactly what you describe. Either they get very dysregulated, and they may still have improvements show up. It may or may not be, in either case, it may or may not be the area of improvement they are most hoping for, because SSP is not a treatment for anything specific. So it's not a treatment for misophonia or hyperacusis.
Right.
It helps to regulate the nervous system. The other thing that happens when people go too quickly is that it looks like nothing happened at all. So sometimes, and they talk a lot in the training about how if you go too quickly, people may get dysregulated. And of course, the trainings have varied, they're improving over time. But what they don't talk a lot about, and I think a lot of providers really are not aware, if they go too quickly, people are less likely to improve. So some of my clients, and one who's gained really a lot of international attention because of his mom posting everywhere, I started him with just 5 seconds at a time. And we are now we started July 17th. We saw improvement with his misophonia by day 2, 10 seconds into SSP. He had level 10 misophonia, and I don't know if that's a clinical term, that's what his mom says, but on bad days, he would hold his breath because his own breathing was triggering him. And I started him with such a ridiculously tiny amount because there was no room at all to risk turning up the dial on the level of suffering that he was going through. So by day 2, only 10 seconds in, his mom was able to speak out loud to him for the first time in over 2 years without triggering him. And I recently presented an advanced 2-day training to SSP providers. And although he, at that point, was about 30 minutes in to the first hour, with listening spread out over 8 months, I had over 7 pages of slides on his improvements. And they are staggeringly astonishing. Like the most dramatic one is that prior to SSP, he has a long list of symptoms, or diagnoses. Prior to SSP, he'd had school trauma and also dyslexia so severe that it would be a battle to get him to sign his name to a greeting card. 3 weeks and only 4 minutes into the music, he started writing not just a book, but a trilogy. And the last word count I'd gotten about a month ago was that it was over 160,000 words long. He has learned AI to create characters. He's created a video game. All of these things would have created or required a lot of reading. But
Hey,
he's now.
Carol, can you
Hmm?
make sure you mention that you're a psychologist?
Oh, I'm a social worker. I'm a clinical social worker. Yeah.
Oh,
So
I'm off.
yeah, good enough. Yeah, so I'm not an audiologist, so I can't speak to some of the details around some of those pieces, but yeah, he's still very much a work in progress, but he's also only, just over 10% into the music. And he's at the point now where his mom says he is wearing his headphones. Before we started, he was wearing them 100% of his waking life. Now he's wearing them about 80% of his waking life. But he's not just tolerating conversations with her now, he's often enjoying them. But he was having daily rage attacks multiple times per day. He hasn't had one since August. And I have others like him that I started with something ridiculous like 10 seconds. And I've also had people have their misophonia resolved doing it over the whole 5 hours over the space of 2 or 3 weeks. But it is really important that rather than just saying, okay, well, I'm going to do 30 minutes per day for this client because that's the current recommendation for maximum. But, or I'm going to be conservative and do 5 minutes. It's really important to watch that client's physiology to see what their physiology is looking for. So for me, when I work with people, it's kind of like solving a puzzle each time. Like, what does this person's physiology want so that we deliver it at the pace that's right for them? And that's when we are likely to see the most dramatic improvements. And I've recently discovered, partly through working with him, that I think one of the reasons that I get often particularly dramatic results is because I've always tended to use small increments sometimes.
So just so I'm understanding what you're saying that you're noticing improvements on the second day after 10 seconds of music?
Well, yeah, 5 seconds per day. And actually, even the first, I know it's it's a little mind-boggling. Stephen Porges has asked me to write up my case studies. I've been in contact with him about this client, and he's trying to get his head around it too. But I actually, I often see the most dramatic results with the tiniest amount. So it kind of flips upside down what we have thought we knew about SSP. I'm neurodivergent, so my brain kind of looks for different, I look for what works rather than what the theory is.
Yeah, so I don't want to sidetrack everybody. I find the idea that 10 seconds of anything could dramatically change someone really tough to buy into.
Absolutely.
I mean,
And
10 seconds, like,
absolutely. And for some people it wouldn't, but for many people it does, and they see bigger improvements than they would with 10 minutes. Yeah, at the smallest increment, like if someone gets dysregulated, I'll use a tiny, like I call it microdosing SSP just to settle them. But for one of my clients, when she had her sound sensitivity became aggravated during SSP, on the 5th hour, she can only tolerate between 2 and 5 seconds at a time. But just 2 seconds when she's dysregulated, the moment the music stops, she feels better. And it is mind bending. You have to kind of see it to believe it. And that approach won't work for everyone, but many people, most of the people I work with will have fairly dramatic improvements. And sometimes it's not in their most hoped for area. We do our best, and we allow results to filter through. If their most desired for area doesn't respond the first time, it likely will in a subsequent round. But it's really not unusual for me to see improvements right away from the first few sessions. And there are people who won't notice anything at all for weeks. And most of those people will still have improvements, but specializing in the most sensitive people, they usually notice something pretty quickly.
Princess and the Pea, huh?
Yeah.
Dacia, you want to
Hi.
talk for a second about what you're seeing with your daughter?
Yeah, so I'll give the shortest summary. At age 4, so I'm a classroom teacher, I guess by trade. I've left the classroom. I'm a foster adoptive mama, so a lot of trauma trainings. Hold on, let me tell my nephews to be quiet a minute. No. And so we have a lot of alphabet soup behind my daughter's name. She's 7.5, but at age 4 is when the ADHD, anxiety, insomnia diagnoses came through. And then they said processing disorder, but nobody pursued that. And I kept saying, are we talking sensory? Are we talking auditory? What are we talking? Because I could see symptoms of both. So anyway, fast forward to finally this January when she was old enough for the normed auditory processing disorder test. She was diagnosed with auditory processing disorder in, I believe, 2 different areas, but I failed to remember which 2. So Facebook, Google, all this stuff. I found Dr. Ray, I believe, early February, mid-February, and we started talking about the low gain hearing aids after our audiologist had said to go like the Phonak FM receivers. And I just loved how Dr. Ray was working with me, and it wasn't pressured at all. She's like, go see if your insurance will cover it and stuff like that. And anyway, I was like, I don't want to wait, like let's just move forward. And I could immediately see, like, we put them in my daughter's ears for the first time, which took some sensory for her, right? Because the hearing aids and getting them in, it took several days to get them in far enough. But all of a sudden she was like, I can hear. And she has normal hearing. She's passed every hearing test no matter what, even though for years I'm like, are you so deaf? Are you, and not trying to like mock that, but like that's how it was. Like you could talk to her and there'd be no reaction. And I'm like, how are you passing your hearing tests? Because there's no anyway, she put those hearing aids in, and like seconds later she's like, I can hear. Like it was just mind boggling how quickly they helped. And over the next few weeks, this was just, this winter, stop. We worked with Dr. Ray, fine-tuned a few things, and I could see emotionally she started to get more regulated. She does have trauma because I didn't get her until age 2. Sit. Let him go. And we've got a few other things that we think are going on besides the diagnoses that she does have. I love that Dr. Ray has said, let's look into cued speech. And I showed them, both my daughters, this a little bit, and sign language, and they're thrilled and they want to use it to communicate. So, and actually, as I was listening to Carol Ann and the SSP, I've heard about it. I've looked into it a little bit. And with my trauma training and stuff, as with anything I work on with my daughters, when you're working with sensory integration, primitive reflex integration, and all these things in regulating, you get dysregulated and have to re-regulate and reteach, the brain and the neural pathways and all of that. So getting dysregulated during SSP or primitive reflex training and all these exercises that we're doing, we have to back off sometimes when I do that with her, just because it does become overload and too much. So I am trying to work with Dr. Ray and some other parents that are interested to really bring cued speech as a maybe normative therapy or something, or like I really am trying to re-envision school, because traditional school is not the best for my oldest daughter. So with my teaching background and a few other things, I'm really trying to envision what would be best to incorporate a world in a school day of, cued speech, equine therapy, trauma training, and all those things. So I know that was a lot of convoluted information, but really these low gain hearing aids have blown my mind with how well my daughter, and there's days I can tell if she's dysregulated. I look at her and I'm like, do you have your hearing aids in? And there's been several times she's like, no. And I'm like, go get them in. So the emotional regulation with the hearing aids has been huge as well.
If we can get her to talk, the person I'd love to hear from is Kim Nish, because because I didn't work with her kids long term, but she has that experience that's very interesting. Kim, are you around?
I don't know. I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
We can hear you fine.
If my microphone's okay. Okay. If my microphone's on, I can talk about, our journey.
Yeah.
Because I started my kids. Okay. So I am now in Florida, but spent most of my time in Northern California. And my oldest is autistic, was practically nonverbal when she graduated high school. She could converse if she was talking about something like a math problem. But beyond that, she could not talk. And she only spoke about 3 or 4 sentences at a time, totally. My youngest, we had known for a long time that there was something wrong. She did not understand speech. And at 7, she got an auditory processing disorder diagnosis, but it was nothing. And we did tomatis, and we did aerobics, and we did like 2 other auditory training things, which helped for about 8 months. And then they would disappear, and they're like, oh, you need to pay us a couple more $1,000 for a booster. And finally, I took her to Stanford, and she got in the booth, and the audiologist started with the hearing test. And this is another way long hearing test. This is about the 5th she's had in 6 months. And every first word she missed. Say the word hold, bolt, say the word can, man, and I mean, it went there. And so the audiologist stops the test. And this is, of course, a grad student, because this is a teaching school. And she comes out to me and says, can we get her on a day when she will behave? And I freaking lost it, because I'm thinking, finally, they'll see this. They'll see this is wrong. They'll tell me what's going on. And I mean, it wasn't, she didn't have time to think in between each of the words. This was actually what she's hearing, and every word was wrong. And the grad student comes out and says, can we
Kim,
get her on
it
a
was
day
a
she's gonna
behavior.
behave?
It was clearly a behavior, not a reaction. It was a behavior. Sure.
Yeah, with no time to think. It's a behavior when you think about it and then put into a plan and action. But she was doing, and so I lost it. And I ended up getting hold of the head of audiology for Stanford. And she took over Amy's case study and basically determined, she said, auditory processing is so rare that we never diagnose it, but it looks like you may have it. And so I'm like, great, what do I do? And she's like, there's nothing. And I was just in tears on that last day. And I'd driven 2 hours each way to get this therapy that I was sure, because Stanford would know what they're doing. And a friend of mine called me and said, I just got out of a conference and I heard this paper presented and you need to call this lady immediately. And it was Dr. Joan Burley of the Able Kids Foundation. And I'm in Ray's group, and a lot of people will hear me mention the paper. So this paper was presented to the Colorado Autism Society. And one of the things it talked about was that auditory processing disorders are responsible for most of autism. She later did a study that was never ever published, and it was extended twice because it was a huge study. It was a multidisciplinary study throughout the entire Denver school district. And what they discovered, and Ray and I have this conversation frequently, is that the first sense you have before you're born with is hearing. You get that in the womb. Everything else is built on top of this. And the ears control your spatial system. So like when Jackie was talking about her son getting up in her face, he wasn't doing it so that he could read lips. He has got a sense of what normal spatial is. And if you don't have your hearing aids in, the spatial system goes away and you lose it. It also controls your sense of motion. And like with my daughter, she ran every place. Within 2 weeks of getting her Able Kids filter, I'm going to say right now, I have an Able Kids filter. I hate it. I love my hearing aids. They work 10 times better. But this was, 20 years ago. And she stopped running everywhere. She stopped stimming. The number of physical manifestations of APD, people don't look at. They don't look at the spatial. They don't look at the fact that your eardrums move before your eyes move. There's a lot of that. And within 2 weeks, she lost 95% of her ADHD symptoms. 2 weeks. The oldest one, after we had seen this miracle occur with her younger sister, I said, you're going to do this. So I took her out of college, and she was having just all kinds of trouble in college, but she really, 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 really wanted to go to college. So I took her to Dr. Burley, and they have a test, and their testing battery is 10 tests. 3 tests for each of the brain areas, and 1 test that measures how well they communicate to each other. And when the doctor there came out, she said she aced all but one. And I said, oh. And she goes, the only thing is, you're only supposed to get 90% on the first three. The second, you're supposed to get 70%. The third set, you're supposed to get between 50 and 60%. The one she did not pass was the one that measured how much her brain was communicating. So basically, she was hearing things 3 times as loud as they were, because all 3 areas of the brain were processing this sound and feeding it to her independently. So she was just drowning in sound. For her, we got her noise canceling earplugs. And she wore them for about 20 months. All the time.
Wait a minute, Kim. Aren't we supposed to tell people they should never use earplugs or headphones because blocking sound will make it worse?
That is the theory. And I would say for anybody that does not have a very low score on that final test, that's probably a good idea. But for somebody that is consistently overhearing, these were another miracle, because within 6 weeks, she was able to walk into a college dining hall and get food. Within 6 months, she was volunteering at her computer lab at school. Within 8 months, she'd met enough people to make friends.
Oh.
So I actually know the next part of that story. And neither one of the kids ever did well with hearing aids. I think one of them never tried it. The other one I saw, and the younger one I saw, and it messed up her balance really terribly. So she wasn't able to tolerate it. But Kim herself ended up having some auditory processing issues and uses hearing aids that are low gain that I fit. So, anyone else want to tell some stories? Like people I've never met before who don't have their pictures up? All right. So, my son Zachary is a real puzzle. I'm not really sure what's going to work with him. We are going to try SSP with him. I'm trying low gain aids with him, and he's so far. I had a big fight with the school system about doing this with him, because when I tried it, they forced us to put on like those Phonak and Spyro, the headset FM system, so they could decide if it was good enough, if he had enough benefit. And in 3 weeks, they decided no, they weren't going to let me do it. They said you can't evaluate your own kid. And I said, who else in this area can do it? And finally, I had him tested by Donna Pitts, who's at Loyola, and she said basically that he failed. Yeah.
And told her that my running time, I dropped 4 minutes in a mile. 4 minutes.
Really?
Because my balance evened out. Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
It's just, there's You don't remember the day I did it?
Oh, maybe I wasn't
You,
listening.
you might have been you were pretty busy that day. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
it's hard
gone
for me to
from
remember.
17 and a half minutes to 13 and a half minutes.
That's not bad. How old are you?
I'm 62.
Mhm. So yeah, so you've been doing better with the low gain aids, but we didn't have any luck with your younger daughter.
No, but she'd already taken out her filter. She was already 20 when you got her.
Hmm.
So
So she was doing well enough.
she was doing well enough. She stopped, she wore an Able Kids filter, which there is science behind it. It's just the science behind it can be, and a lot more can be taken care of with the hearing aids.
Mhm. I mean, my problem with the filters is that, yeah, you do all of these tests to get ready to get the filter, and then what happens is they mail it to you. It's custom made, sure, but the filter itself, they're all the same. And they're not even like specifically changed for like each person.
It's older technology. I do know the situation that led Dr. Burley to its development. For those that don't know, I worship Dr. Burley. She is one of the most brilliant persons I know.
But she's
But
not in control of that company anymore.
no, she's not. And the hearing aids work better. You don't have to fly to Fort Collins. Filters worked about 70% of the time. About 50% of the time, they were miraculous. About 20%, they were another tool in the tool chest. But you didn't find out if they were going to work or not until you actually did a trial.
So you had to fly all the way out there to go to Colorado to get a trial to find out after it comes back in the mail if it's going to work.
You have an inkling when you're in the middle of the trial and the last part of the trial, and they give you that filter. And oh my God, the relief of just the sound that's been battering you is tangible. You know, at that point, it's probably going to work, but it's still annoying as hell.
Yeah.
I said, I have both. I prefer my hearing aids.
I mean, that's why I like the virtual audiology.
Yeah.
Is the ability that you don't need to travel, that we can fit you in real life, not in a clinic.
And the second time you see me, you know what I've been doing and what sound I've been exposed to. And what are you doing being in that loud environment, you know, where your watch is going off every 5 minutes? That kind of thing.
So, and is it, let me finish talking about Zach for a minute. Can you see this picture on your screen? So the top line is his hearing, okay? And the bottom line, like from low pitch to high pitch, low pitch, and then going to high pitch. So it's totally all above 20 or 15, so it's normal. But this bottom line is weird because it's a measurement of discomfort levels. And the average kid, generally, they'll put up with sound down to about 70 or 80 decibels or more. And Zach is telling me, I'm in pain at 30. I'm in pain at 20. And this distance here is called the dynamic range. And essentially what it means is he goes from barely hearing to pain and almost nothing, you know? So he's been, is it behavior? Is it reaction? I have no idea. And it's sad because they say, you know, the cobbler's children go without shoes. And here I am taking care of all of these other kids, and he's having these behaviors, and I'm going, what the heck is wrong with him? Maybe it's just the autism. But maybe what's really happening, it's like having somebody like follow along beside you and poking you with a thumbtack, you know, pain, 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 pain. Maybe that's why he's in so much pain, you know? So I don't know what's going to happen with him. My husband is ex-military, and he doesn't want us, you know, labeling the kid. It's going to make him look weak. But his behavior's been so just awful. Lying, stealing, you know, I mean, not bad things, but you know, when you find out that he's basically stolen $500 on in-app purchases because he needs that for regulation for this one game, and he's been just sneaking it every day whenever he can. I mean, the answer is not to cut off his access. The answer is to try to figure out why he needs it. Carrie, are you around? Did I scare her off? Oh, there she is again. Where did she go? Carrie, are you around? You're connecting to audio. Hey, I've never seen your face before. I've talked to you.
How are you?
It's another kid I didn't fit. That's really cool because back
Trying to
then
figure out
I was
Zoom.
fitting everybody.
Here we go. All right. Am I in there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I missed part of it because I got disconnected. So and I was trying to figure out my camera. So I apologize. I am just a new iPhone user. So I'm behind the times. So I
You might
just
want
like
to
to
prop it
chime in a little
somewhere.
bit. I have, am I too bouncy?
You're bouncy.
So I have never met Dr. Ray.
Mm-mm.
How about now?
Better.
Am I good?
Mm-hmm.
Better? Okay. So I've never met Dr. Ray, but because of her, my now 9th grade son is doing really well in school. So I knew at 3 years old, something was different with him. And when he went to go get Bromlett's ear tubes, the audiologist or the ENT said that he was had glue ear and he had been deaf, and we never knew it. So he was deprived of language for about 4 years. And when he went to preschool, I had asked the school system for help because he was unable to follow directions. He could do 2 things at one time, and that was it. And so they all said it was my imagination. So I went down the rabbit hole.
It's
I'm
behavior. It's
paramilitary
behavior.
and I have a medical background. Yes. So he would have meltdowns. He would hide down in the bathroom in elementary school or go see the school nurse. And so I was getting phone calls every day that he was missing content. So they prescribed the FM system, which he could hear the teachers go to the restroom, have private conversations, and everything was too loud. So there you get behaviors, meltdowns, headaches, school refusal, and he was losing content. He would be very sad at the end of the day. He would mask all day long. He would come home and just thrash around in pain, covering his ears. He couldn't fall asleep and stay asleep. So his nervous system. So I went down the rabbit hole of medically what was wrong with this child. We live in a rural community in Kentucky. So any city's about 2.5 hours away. So I just happened to come across Dr. Ray's Facebook page and went down the rabbit hole of what is auditory processing. And he started check marking the boxes. So I reached out to University of Louisville and to try to find an audiologist that would talk to him. But he was only 5 or 6 at the time. So therefore, no testing could happen. So I was told behavior, figure it out. So I learned what an IEP was. He was following behind in content some more, couldn't write, couldn't spell, couldn't do his sight words. So I got him into like an RTI, and I learned later that school is about data. So more phone calls every day. Come get your kid. He's melting down. He won't stay in class. So I kind of got sad and mad at the same time, and the military side came in, and I'm not from this rural area. So I learned everything I could about auditory processing disorder through Dr. Ray's Facebook and web page there. So fast forward a few years, I got a better IEP, and then more meltdowns, more covering of his ears, but now he's 8 years old. So now the audiologist at U of L would test, and he has, I guess, is on a spectrum. So he has 4 different versions of auditory processing. So again, trying the FM system didn't work. So I said, nope. And I pulled him from public school and I homeschooled. And then I got I just kind of broke auditory processing down into chunks of what is he needing to learn: language, reading, comprehension, working memory, executive functioning. And I just broke it down for the school system. So now I drive 45 minutes one way to another public school system that's out of the box type of school. It's a STEM hands-on school. The previous school told me he'll never graduate. He can't learn. It's a parenting behavioral issue, and went down that rabbit hole. New school system found out he has an engineering brain, and school is very loud. So now we got low gain program hearing aids through U of L. I did not know at the time that Dr. Ray was able to do it over Zoom. So I kind of sent her data to the U of L audiologist, and we had a meeting to say, okay, there's an audiologist in this other state that does these type of programs because my son hears too much. So how can we isolate to help his brain not work so hard? So I don't know if she reached out personally with her or just did the literature research. And so my son became a guinea pig at University of Louisville. The moment he put his hearing aids on and she did the little testing for him, his face lit up. He turned to me and he teared up. I'll start tearing up. He said, "Mommy, I can hear you." So that anytime I hear a kid or a parent that says that their kid hears too much or they have ADHD and they can't learn in school, I will reach out on Dr. Ray's Facebook page and just say, hey, DM me. I got some literature, some data. Your kid may or may not have this, but hey, hear me out. I've fought a school system with an IEP, teachers still to this day, but he's a freshman now at this high school project based, and he is shining bright because he has accommodations. They want to learn what auditory processing is. OT stepped in and ordered him expensive over his hearing aid, noise canceling headphones for independent work. Is going on 3 weeks. And he said, Mom, I've been having good days because school is so loud for these kids. And your nervous system is in fight or flight. And these adults and the school systems don't understand that you have to reach that child first. Go ahead, sorry.
Does he have a microphone to use with the noise canceling headphones so he can still hear the teacher?
Yes, ma'am. So it's his choice because he only has like 15 kids per class. So he still has the FN mic that he's allowed to ask, and he'll detach it and put it on his desk so he can hear his group work because it's a project-based hands-on, but he chooses not to. They are teaching him AI this year. We had his IEP last month, and in his new IEP is how can we get an upperclassman to teach him AI for the reading part, the comprehension part, and the headphones that he bought has a microphone to teach him text to speech, and the different apps on his Chromebook to like change it, read it back to him, and they're going to teach him how to use that technology. And he's just a freshman. But he is having a good time at trying to be an out of the box kid, but he can tell what other kids are getting sensory overload. So what we found out in 8th grade, he gets listening fatigue. So the behaviors that you see, these kids work extra hard in a classroom to filter, even with the hearing aids and the noise canceling and all the things. He gets built-in breaks. He can remove himself, but his body still always thinks he's in fight or flight. So he was we had to take him to the neurologist because we thought he was having seizures, because he would just zone out at school, do behaviors that were negative, destructive, punch walls, and anxiety and frustration. But come to find out, it's just it's a fatigue overload. So Dr. Ray had started posting some things on that, on listening fatigue, and I was able to get school this year. The OT stepped in to educate the teachers what that truly means for our kind of kids. So now anytime you see me on Facebook, I'm hollering to all these parents in the beginning of their journeys, all the things that I've learned from her Facebook page. So I wish she and I lived closer. We could tag team a lot of things. And I've learned a lot of IEP type school, mama bear kind of advocacy. So I'm grateful that I ran across her 6 years ago. So that's my story.
Love you too. All right, I think we're basically, I think we're pretty much out of time for today, but we're gonna have some really interesting people tomorrow. One of the people who's coming is named Nye, and Nye is actually a blind interpreter and has APD and hyperacusis and uses aids. And we'll talk about, spatial awareness and how it's really changed their ability to interpret. And we're going to have a deaf naturopath who's going to talk about what it's like growing up with processing problems, who had the hearing drop as a teenager. So if you want to come back, we will see you tomorrow. You guys take care.